Hi there, welcome to another video. Again, looking at, well, I said 3-position switch, but it could be any number of positions you need on a switch or a dial, any control that has a number of positions on it. I made a video a while ago looking at a 3-position switch. It was on the TBM, but that was only an example really. The concept works for any other multi-position switch. I'll leave a link to it in the description, and it should pop up about now somewhere, I think at the top right hand corner of the screen, so you can go back and look at it. It's a detailed look at how to use a 3-position switch with graphics on the Stream Deck, and it used a technique where a short press, an ordinary press on the button, would make the switch move up, and a long press, a slightly longer press, will make it move down. And that method works. I'm happy with that method. People seem to like it. But this one explores a different technique which has advantages and disadvantages about it. I thought I'd show you what the method is, and it's worth having it in your armoury if you need to tackle this kind of problem. But I've got a few reservations which I'll talk about later on. But let's get into how on earth the actual technique works. So this is what the script looks like. It looks fairly complex to start with, but if you break it down, it's not that hard. It's called the sequence function, the SEQ, and what we're doing is we're telling it the list of values that the variable that controls whatever function, switch or whatever it is you're trying to use. You've looked at it, you've explored it, you've seen the various values that this variable can take, and it created a list of them. In my example here, I'm going to use a local variable called my test. It's a fictitious variable, but it does work. It genuinely works in X's and O's. You can set up any L var you like. Give it your own name. Make sure it doesn't clash with anything else. That's why I've called it my test. That's not going to clash with any other real variable. So that's the variable we're going to use, and we need to tell it how long the list is. That's the important part of how this function works. And what it's going to do is it's going to do some work on this data and write it back into the same variable. So it'll update that variable depending on what's happened here. And this is what it says in the manual. This is what it does: that it reads the value of whatever variable you've asked it to look at. It will step through this list and compare it to that variable, and when a match is found, it will write the next value in the list back into the variable. Let me animate it, show you it working, so you can see what I'm talking about. So we've got a variable called my test, which starts by default at 0. So read the variable. It reads it. It's a 0. Now step through the list and compare it to the list to that variable. Do a comparison, and it finds straight away we've found a comparison. It matches. So the 0, 0 matches. If they match, write the next value back into this variable. So they match. That 1 will get written into here. The 0 becomes a 1. Next time we run it, we call my test. The value is 1. Read the variable, and it'll go work its way along the list left to right looking for this comparison. It'll not match that, move along, try the next one, and it'll be happy. That's matches. So the next value that will get written into here is a 2. So the next time we run it, it'll do the same thing again. It'll read the value, find it's a 2, not match there, not match there, will match here, but there isn't a next value to write in because you've told it the list is only three values long. So it'll then switch to the beginning and it'll write the first value back into here. So it'll go to 0. And I can show you that actually working. If I bring up my Stream Deck, on this button here, I've got it's a text gauge, so it's looking at my test value and writing that value onto the button, and it will call, when we press that button, this piece of script. It's in the test folder, and I'm asking it to try, well, I'm going to ask it to try the sequence variable for me. So let's update that so it's calling the right piece of text. And if I bring my script up for you, in the test folder, it's this try the sequence. So that text absolutely matches what I had on the screen on my PowerPoint, and so you'll be able to see that working. So if I just sit that over here a little bit, it's showing value 0. If I press the button on my Stream Deck, it'll go through. It's gone to 1, it's gone to 2, and it's gone to 0. So it's totally happy with that. That's working absolutely fine. We could do other things with this. We can make the list longer if we want. So add another one to it, tell it there's 4 items in the list, update that. So again, when I press on that button there, it'll step through to 3. So you can have as many positions as you like. In fact, it doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3. We can make it 10, 20, 30, update that. And so as I step through this now, it'll step through those values in whatever order you put them on. So if I wanted to put 20 here and 10 there, update that. Again, watch it step through them. It'll do 20, then 10, then 30. So it just reads them in whatever order you put them in there. And that's quite useful, particularly for that TBM switch, because that starts with default value 2 and then goes to 1. So 2 is off, 1 is taxi, and 0 is landing light. So being able to reverse the order, that's important. So that's fine. One of the things it won't do is let's try this. Imagine I had a switch that started at position 1, went to position 2. So it started at 0, went to 1, went up to 2, and then came down to 1 again. So it looks like it would go 0, 1, 2. So it goes, so that could be off, half on, fully on, back to half on, and back to 0. It looks like it should cycle like that. And let me demonstrate that kind of not working. So we start with 0, it goes to 1, it goes to 2, it goes to 1, and you would expect it to come around to 0 again, and it doesn't. It goes to 2, and then to 1, and then to 2, and it kind of gets locked into this loop. And what's actually happening is when it starts the comparison, it found the 0, it was happy with that, so it moved to 1. Next time it found the 1, was happy with that, so it wrote 2. Next time it did the comparison, it would pick up the 2, compare it, and find the 1, totally happy with that. But don't forget, it's starting the list at the left hand side every time. So when the value becomes 1, it starts the comparison, and it finds this 1 and says, oh, I'm happy, that's fine, I've got a comparison, I'll give you 2. When it starts the comparison again, it's holding 2, it gets to the 2 and it finds the 1. So it goes through again, starting with that 1, and it hits this 1 here. So it never actually does a comparison against that 1 there to find that it's at the end of the list. It will go to 0. So that's a bit of a problem, that we can't go up and down the sequence. And I can kind of show you that working. If I go to here, let's show you that on the actual on the gauge here for the actual TBM switch. So what I would need to do is to make sure that it's calling the right script. Okay, so if I look at this script here that I've got written into my X's and O's, let's bring my scripting up there, and I've got this one here which is going to be looking at the sequence for the landing lights. And I said the landing light starts off with by default 2. 2 is off, 1 is taxi, and 0 is the landing lights. And we'll just go through that, and this is reading the variable, and this is how it writes to that variable. It writes by saying set at the end of it, so it's slightly different from what I saw before, but that's the script I'm going to call. Let's shrink this a little bit and get into the flight simulator cockpit. So that's what we're going to be looking at there. We'll have that over here, and I will put my script somewhere about here so you can see the script. So if we go through here, if we press this button here, you'll see that it goes to the taxi, to the landing light. So it's got to here, and it'll go around, straight around that loop, and put it to 2. So it's a bit, it does work, but it's a bit unusual that you can't go from taxi landing back to your taxi lights. You have to go through the off and taxi. But if you're happy with that, that works. If you're happy with going through that, it's not flight critical. Yeah, you turn your lights off and then turn them on to taxi. It's a bit strange that if you're in taxi mode, you can't switch them off. You have to go through landing lights. But if you're happy with that, but as I said, it won't go through the sequence 2 to 1 to 0 to 1 and back. You can't do that with this function here. So there is another function that we can use. It's a little bit more complex. Let's look at this one here. So it's an I sequence, an indexed sequence, ISEQ function. So it's got an index in it. What it does is it does what we did before. It does this comparison. I'm using a slightly different version of the variable so they don't clash with the other one. So my test 2 is my variable. So it reads that, it checks along the list, but what it does here is it remembers where you were last time you did it. So it'll remember, when it gets to this one here, it'll remember the comparison it made. When it comes to do the next comparison, it'll check here when it finds the match and realize it's at the end of the list and flip around to the 0 again and start again. So it will go 0, 1, 2, 1 and back again. But everything else is the same. It's a list of values, it's checking a variable, it's got an index variable which starts at 0 by default and then works its way along 0, 1, 2, 3 until it knows it's at the end of the list. So it will start checking at that particular point. It writes back into the same variable, into my test 2, so it updates your variable, and it updates the index automatically to the next step. So that's how it works. And again, I could show you that in operation. If I bring in my Stream Deck here, I'm showing 2 text variables at the moment. The top one, I'm showing you the value of what would be passed to the switch or knob or whatever it is you're trying to control. So that's my test 2, and that's being shown in white. So the top one is the value that's being sent to the device. There's the index variable, where am I looking, and I'm showing that in red. And when I press the button, let's push that up a little bit higher. If I where am I sending it to? I'm sending it to a script called try ISEQ. So again, if we bring up my try ISEQ, so you can see that working here. There is the text, and it's going to go from 0 to 1 to 2 to 1 through that sequence there. So that should work quite happily. We'll just check that out. So I'm pressing this button here on my Stream Deck. So it's gone to position 1 and the value is 1. It's gone to position 2. It's going to position 3 this time, doing the comparison. So it now goes back to 0. So if you watch this value here, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 1 off. So it goes 1 to 2, back to 1, then off. So it cycles through quite happily. And I've got that here for the landing lights. I've got that text, that piece of script there, so we can show the landing lights working. Just need to edit this here so that when I press the button, it calls that piece of script. So again, I can show you that working in the cockpit. If we bring the flight simulator back into view and bring everything else back in. There's the script that it's going to work its way through. So when I press this button here, it goes to land, taxi, landing, taxi, and off. So again, as long as you're happy with it cycling through all of these states, that's fine. Again, not mission critical. The fact that I have to go, if I'm in taxi and I want to switch the taxi lights off, the only way to do that is landing, taxi, and off. It works. Why I'm hesitant about it is I wouldn't use it for something like deploying flaps. If you had it going from 0 to flaps 1 to flaps 2 to full flaps, if you had your flaps out and then you wanted to retract them, you've put them out at first notch and want to retract them, you don't really want to be forced to put down full flaps. Admittedly, but if you did it quickly enough, it wouldn't actually deploy full flaps. But it feels weird to do something that is safety critical. Putting full flaps out at the wrong speed, that's a disaster waiting to happen. So I wouldn't use it for that. So you've got to be careful where you use it. But one place I would use it is in a different. Let's have a look at a different aircraft. Let's change to my Skyhawk. Bear with it while it reloads. And I'll bring my Stream Deck back into play here. Let's get ready for that. If you look at my Skyhawk down here, there's this the fuel selector. It goes from one position to another, and there's nothing critical about that. It's going to go from both tanks to one tank, back to both tanks, and back to one tank. So you've got to pass through that central position every time. So on this indicator here, it's calling this piece of script here. And I'll bring that up for you so you can see what that script looks like. My fuel selector script. So there's no 0 involved. By default, it starts in 1, which is both tanks. Then I think it's left tank, back to both, then to right tank, and it goes around that sequence quite happily. And using the index sequence, so it remembers where it was. So it's quite happy with having this duplicate. It knows which one it's looking for when it looks at the one. So again, I can show you that working. Let's just move that around. So you'll see the graphic on here and the graphic on there match. And it remembers where it is each time. So there's nothing critical about that. And in fact, I can change this manually on here. And if I go back into my Stream Deck, you'll see that matches up. So everything is matching quite happily. So that works. Where I wouldn't use it, for instance, if I again change my change my aircraft back again to the TBM, and that was the Kenmore one. If I look at the fuel selector on here, the fuel selector goes from left tank to right tank. And if I was forced to cycle through all 3 options, I would be forced into going to the off position as well, and then back, which doesn't feel comfortable. Switching your fuel off and on mid-flight, not a good idea. So use that technique with caution. What I'm going to do for my next video is I will show you exactly how I built the graphics for this slider gauge. Well, that's interesting. It has killed my engine. I just noticed that the prop stopped, so it didn't like that at all. what I'll do is I'll do an in-depth video showing you how I built the fuel gauge and control for the Cessna, so that you can see how I got the graphics and everything sorted out for that. Okay, so that'll be my next video. So anyway, just to recap, there are two functions: a sequence function, which if you're just going to go cycling around 0 1 2 3 0 1 2 3 or something like that, the sequence function is dead easy to write. Slightly more complex is the index sequence. You need to have two variables for that, but you saw how I did that, and that means you can go 0 1 2 1 0 or whatever you want it to go through, and you can use that for switches. You can use that for rotary knobs that click between different positions, so you can turn things up and down again with a single switch without using the long press. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and I hope that helps you.